Good morning and welcome to this series of webinars on case writing. I am Devapratim Purkayastha and the topic for today's webinar is what makes a good teaching case and how to find a suitable topic for a teaching case. So today we are going to we have set some objectives for the teaching for this webinar, where after this webinar we will be able to understand what makes a good teaching case, to identify a suitable topic for a teaching case, identify and qualify a case trigger, and frame the objective for a teaching case. Most importantly, we will get started writing on our journey of writing a good teaching case on a solid footing. I understand that there is a diversity of audience here, and there are people who are new to case writing. At the same time, there are people who have had experience with writing teaching cases, and also some of you may be accomplished case teachers and case writers as well. So this will be of benefit to everyone. For the sake of achieving the objective of this webinar, we would like to take everyone along, even the newest of the person, the newest to case writing. So, and for the others also, it doesn't hurt to go back to basics once in a while. If you ask me, it's invaluable for even the most accomplished case teacher and case writer. So, how we will go about this webinar? First of all, I will give you an overview of the topic. I will have my presentation on both the aspects that we are going to discuss today about what makes a good teaching case, as well as how you can find a suitable topic for a teaching case. But so what we will do is, after that we will start taking the question and answers. So whenever a question pops up in your mind, you can use the chat options to send us those questions. You can do it after I finish the presentation as well. So then I will take up the questions one by one and will try to resolve it to the best of my abilities. So we are discussing teaching case here. So what is a teaching case? Our teaching case is about a business situation which will be useful for teaching students, to give them some experience of the real world. So it is documented in a way that you give enough information about the business situation, and there would be some dilemmas as well, some problems, there may be also some opportunities. So students are required to get into the shoes of the protagonist wherever possible and try to analyze the case and come up with their recommendations. So this is what we try to achieve with a teaching case. Now, from my discussions with various colleagues as well as some of my peers who have been doing case teaching workshops or case writing workshops as well, they tell me that there is some amount of confusion between what is a teaching case and what is a research case. So let us resolve this, because what we are interested in here is a teaching case, and all our talk here would be on a teaching case, and that is what we are expecting when we are expecting some entries to any journals or even to our conference. So first of all, it is about the application that these two type of cases are put to. Teaching cases are for teaching purpose, whereas the research cases are for research purpose. Put simply, teaching cases facilitate teaching and adds to the practical knowledge of students or trainees, whereas a research case is where the case methodology is used as a research methodology and used to support research findings. So like any other research paper, these research cases are qualitative research papers which goes towards creating knowledge and also adding to the body of theoretical knowledge. Other differences are in the target audience itself. Like the teaching cases are written with a very interesting storyline so that the students can relate to it. and they highlight practical applications of theory and concepts to the real world. Whereas research cases are more evidence-based and written keeping in mind the academic peers. So when they go through peer review, they will be able to publish the cases and convince their peers that yes, this has theoretical value. The teaching cases are intended to create a dialogue with students and encourage them to think critically, analyze the case and come up with their own recommendations and action plans. Whereas the research case is more academic and focused on research outcomes. So now that this issue has been clarified, let us also look at what are the different formats that a teaching case can take up. These are just a few of those formats. Like teaching cases can be decision focused or decision forcing cases. There can be discussion cases, illustrations, walkthroughs, or exercises. This is not meant to be exhaustive, just to give an example. And a decision focused case or a decision forcing case is one where the students are forced to get into the shoes of a decision maker and they have to solve a problem or a dilemma. Now enough information is given in the case and it is written in a style that students can get into the shoes of the protagonist easily and come up with their recommendations. Discussion cases may be more descriptive and may be focused on a few issues. Now there should be it should be able to create some discussion among the students and debate among the students through which students can learn about these key issues and about application of theory to practice. Illustration cases are the ones where there is documentation of a problem as it comes up in a real world and how theory is applied to solve those problems. By reading and discussing these cases, students can learn a lot. And walkthrough cases are very similar to illustration cases, but this may be more on a process, like say McDonald's assembly line or any other processes. So a very good documentation of the process is taken place, and then these cases put to the students, and by reading that also they learn a lot, and at the same time when they discuss it, things get even clearer about those particular processes. The exercise case, through this, here I mean that these cases may be more solution focused. Like there is some problem and you are trying to solve those problems, and this may also involve some formulas and other quantitative methods as well. So in some cases it may so happen that they may even have a right answer, definite right answer, which most of the cases don't have. So now we will see what makes a good teaching case. For a teaching case to be considered as good, it has to be well researched, well written, useful and relevant. Now a case really needs to be well researched because that will determine the depth of the case, and the depth of the case is which will enable a student to have a thorough analysis and at the same time will increase the quality of interactions in the classroom and assess the learning outcomes. So the correctness of research and data is very important. And particularly if you are trying to publish the case in a journal, this is invaluable. They give a lot of emphasis on how well researched the case is. As an editorial board member of Case Research Journal, one of the top journals in the world, I am aware the kind of quality that goes into a publishable case, and they are very finicky about the quality. And as such, most of the other journals, case journals as well, are also going to give a lot of weightage to research that has gone into a case. So considering that this is such an important topic, we have scheduled a full webinar on research for writing a publishable teaching case, and that is on 21st of April be sure to tune in on that one. The next thing is how well written the case is. This is very, very important in the sense that this will determine whether students can relate to it or not. So the writing style really matters. It has to be a story that catches the attention of the audience and prompts them to read further. So it should be of such a quality that even if a case is not assigned to someone, they should find it interesting to read the case. So the manner of presentation of data is very important here, because that goes towards making a case interesting and engaging. And the author should be able to weave in multiple perspectives. Single perspectives are of little value in a teaching situation, because they may be one-sided. This may lead to a one-sided case, or just a single perspective which does not provoke enough thought in the students, and they all may end up with the same kind of recommendations, which does not really differ from the perspective that is given in the case. So it is also important for a writer to be writing with by taking a critical view. They should not be taking up information at face value. They should really look at the validity of the data as well. Now, this involves a lot of nuances. So, the nuances of writing a teaching case is the topic of our third webinar that will be in May. So, there we will discuss in great depth how to write a good teaching case. Next, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Likewise, whether a case is good or not will be determined by its utility, the usefulness of the case. So what makes the case useful? So one of the things that goes towards making a case useful is the versatility of the case. That can the case be put to multiple uses? For example, I have written a case of corporate entrepreneurship and innovation at Google. Now this is a very popular case. Now what goes towards making this case popular? One thing is that it is an entrepreneurship case, as the title of the case suggests, but at the same time, the case can also be put to use in an organizational behavior class, a strategic HRM class, an innovation management class, or even a strategic management class. So versatility of usage of a case does matter here when you are looking at utility. So is the useful life of the case. Can the case withstand the test of time? Now, cases can be written in a particular way which extends the life of the case. Now, these are also some of the nuances that we are going to discuss in the third webinar. But one of the most important things that goes towards making a case useful is the teaching note. Teaching note, or instructor manual, as some call it, is a vital part of a teaching case, because that demonstrates how the case is useful, and most of the time it is this which determines whether some teacher picks it up for the class or not. And to make it useful, one of the good things about a case is that it remains current, interesting and challenging, and if it does so, then it will stay there for a long time, useful for a long time. So coming to the relevance of the case, how important is relevance? Extremely important, because if the case you are preparing is not relevant to the educational objectives, to the expectations of the students, if teachers cannot relate to it, if students cannot relate to it, then probably the case is not relevant, and probably there should have been a lot of more thought that should have gone into it while writing the case to make it relevant. So suppose in our ICSC we have a theme topic of innovation, and our knowledge partner, the Case Center, has generously agreed to have a very nice, to offer a very nice prize for that topic. I'm sure some of you may be thinking of writing a case on innovation, but if it comes across that the case has everything to do with other things but little to do with innovation, probably that case is not relevant for the topic at all. So one should look at the relevance of the case very thoroughly when they are looking at finding a good topic for the case. And the other things that goes into making our case suitable topic is how you frame the objectives for the case. Next is identify the case trigger and also qualify the case trigger. Now these three things need not come in any particular order. It can start with identification of a case trigger also, because intuitively also you can see something, a news or something, and you understand that this is a very good case trigger. Now you can look at the scope of the case that you are going to develop and also frame the objectives and drill down to the teaching objectives. So it can start from anywhere, but it's vital that you go through all these three parts in finding a suitable case topic. So let us look at the objectives first. How to frame the objectives and why you should be framing the objectives. And what are these objectives? The objectives is what the case will help teach. So there can be broader objectives as well, like whether you want to write a decision focused case or you want to write a descriptive case, things like that may be broader objectives. But soon you will have to drill down to the educational objectives. So, and this forms the basis for your case structure. So the structure will be determined by your teaching objectives. And what information you will be including in the case, what information you will be collecting, what you will be leaving out, all will be determined by the objectives of the case. So I would like to share an example with you here. Like recently I was involved in writing a case on OnePlus. Now OnePlus, as you may be aware, is a tech startup smartphone company that has positioned itself as a challenger to the iPhone with the kind of features that it provides, but at almost half the price. Now I thought we should prepare a case on OnePlus India's strategy. So this case that we did was designed to evaluate the OnePlus globalization strategy and its expansion strategy in India, to understand the factors that led to the success of OnePlus in India, to understand the importance of the Indian market to OnePlus growth objectives, and also identify the challenges, and at the same time give the students a chance to explore the strategies that the company can take in this to make itself an even bigger success in India. Now when you look at these objectives, you can immediately realize that this can be quite useful for our international marketing and even a business strategy course. But from a writer's perspective, these objectives gives you a blueprint as to what information you need to collect, how you will structure the case to meet those objectives. So what you are essentially doing here is that you are looking at these objectives and asking yourself, how am I going to achieve each one of these objectives? For instance, if I have a lot of information on OnePlus, but all of it is on the global scene, all of it is about its global strategy, probably that will not be sufficient for me to write a case on the Indian context. Those information is useful, but more to put up a context. But we would really need information on its strategies in India, what it is trying to do, what initiatives what initiatives are taking place in India, and what are the challenges, and how they are looking at solutions and what they are trying to achieve. Now going to the next part, that is identifying the case trigger. Now a case trigger is anything that triggers in your mind an idea that this can be a good topic for the case. So this can come from a number of sources, and I am sure there are many teachers attending this webinar, and for us, our mind is tuned that way. When we see something, we immediately realize that yes, this can be a topic for a case, so no problems there. And these triggers can come from any news, like say more than a year ago now, we are all aware of the problems faced by Nestle in India relating to its Maggi brand. Now, after that, so many teachers and case writers could relate to this situation. They thought it as a very good trigger, and they came up with some very good cases on this topic. Now, these are some of those obvious case triggers that you get from news, but there can be more obscure ones as well. Like last year, I was reading an article about a dam disaster in Brazil. Now, this was a tailings dam that are used in iron ore mining, and this was being managed by a subsidiary of BHP Billiton, one of the top mining companies in the world. Now, when the dam breach happened, it led to huge environmental disaster and also affected the communities in Brazil, particularly in the Bento Rodrigues area. Now, when I read this news, I immediately related it to how process safety can be improved in companies, or what should be the issues and what are the associated issues and challenges. And this can be effectively taught in our operations management class. As well as you can also teach this case in CSR or business ethics class about the responsibilities of companies to maintain the safety of their operations, as well as when some disaster like this happens, what are you going to do about it. Now, this can also come from general reading. Like when I was in my MBA, I first read about Body Shop. Even before, like when I was in my school days, I knew about the Bhopal gas tragedy. So years later, I took up these topics for writing a case, and they are doing well as well, because I thought that these were relevant topics, though they were a little older, but there are unresolved issues even now, and I could take up those cases and make some good cases out of them. So this general reading can also give us a lot of ideas. Sometimes prior knowledge or experience can also give us a lot of case ideas. Like I hail from the pharmaceutical industry, so when I started writing cases, some of my first cases were dealing with the pharmaceutical companies, and more particularly in the functional areas where I was working, like say sales, Salesforce management, and then product management. So most of the topics of my cases, it was easier for me to relate to things that were happening in pharmaceutical companies, and I wrote quite a few of those cases. And it may not need to always have, it does not always require you to have some professional experience with the company. Sometimes when you are using some products or some services of other companies also, you may get some very potent triggers which you can develop into cases. Now these case triggers can also come from students as well as your colleagues. Then these case triggers can come from enlightened search based on objectives. Like there was a time when I was spending a lot of my time in mapping cases to particular parts of the syllabus. Now when I was doing this, I realized that there are certain areas in which cases were not there to be mapped to certain portions of the syllabus, and that prompted me to consciously search for case subjects which will cover these topics. And this kind of exercise can also be very useful in the sense that you are sure when you come up with a case that it will be very tightly mapped to the theory in the syllabus. Now, discussion with company personnel can also give many great case ideas. Now, those who are involved in case writing know that this is not a very easy ask, in the sense that access to companies can be quite difficult to get. But if you have contact with the company, make sure to make it count, because there will seldom be any company where there will be no interesting things happening and things that your students cannot learn from. So once you have a trigger, it does not mean that your job is done and you can easily go ahead and prepare a teaching case, because you have to also ask yourself whether this is a practical trigger. Is it feasible for you to go ahead with this case trigger? Because there can be so many hitches in between. So you have to qualify the trigger first. So first thing you have to see is whether they really meet your objectives. If they are not meeting your objectives, they are not relevant. So probably you have to relook at that case trigger once again. Then you have to look at whether you have access to the information to develop that case. Because based on your objectives, you will realize that you have to collect a certain type of data for your case. Now, if that is not possible, then probably you should not go ahead with that trigger at that point of time. So even if you have access to the information, you have to ask yourself, is this information relevant? Is this information credible? So all those things also goes into qualifying your trigger. If you are writing a case from field research, you have to be pretty much confident that you should be able to get an authorization letter from the company. Because if you have not done that, a lot of effort will go in, a lot of time will be spent, and ultimately you will have nothing to show for it. So for any trigger that you pick up, this exercise you have to do to qualify the trigger. You have to also look at the resources. Do you have the funds? You may have access to a company and they are also cooperating with you, but you need to travel for that. So do you have the time and the funds for that? If you are not having that, probably you need to relook at the case trigger as such. Like being timely is also very important. You are preparing a case for a particular objectives. Probably you want to use it in the next semester. But by that time, if you are not able to finish it, can you look at any other trigger which you can do in the meantime? Similarly, if you are thinking of submitting a case to ICSC, we have a deadline. So you have to be reasonably sure that the topic that you are taking up should be workable and you will be able to complete it and submit in time for the conference. So now, before I start taking your questions, I would like you to ponder on some of the useful questions, which these cases are really useful when you are getting started writing your case. Particularly for the new case writers, it will be invaluable. So the first question is, what issues will the case focus on? So this is scope to the objective of the case. So this defines the scope and even maybe drill down to the specifics. Next question is, what analysis is required to address those issues? Third question is, what data is required by the students to address these issues satisfactorily? Because this has big implications for what kind of data you are going to require, what you are going to collect, and you are going to put in the case. And where can this data be obtained? And can this data be obtained in a resource efficient way? So now that I have completed my presentation, I would ask you to bombard me with your questions. So when you are asking these questions also, you can ask any questions. Feel free to ask any questions, because it will not be useful only for you, but also for all the people who are attending the webinar. So one question that has come up is, how much time is required to write a teaching case, good teaching case? Now, this depends on the case that you are taking up. It may differ from case to case, but if you are thinking of writing a good teaching case and if you have good access to information, I guess you will be able to complete a case within 2 months. It also has to do with what source you are going to take up. If you are doing it from field research, probably it may take longer also. Sometimes it may take up to 1 year or even more. But if you have very good access to the company, I am sure you will be able to complete it within 2 months as well. And if you are working with secondary data and you are really doing a very good research and you are trying to, and if you are coming out with a very well documented case, then also probably you can finish the project within 2 months. And looking at another question now, it is what can be done if I find a good trigger that could be developed into a case, but there are few sources of information. Now, you have a good trigger, but you don't have enough sources of information. Now, in this case, you have to make some calls. Like one is, if you don't have enough sources of information, probably you should look for some other case trigger. But if you think there is enough information for at least writing a shorter case, a more focused case, maybe dealing with lesser number of issues, then probably you can attempt it. But if you are really not confident about the number of sources, then probably you should look for some other case trigger. Okay, I have another question. While writing a HR case, if I find information about innovation practices of a firm, is it better to incorporate that in the same case or write a completely new case? Now, this is an interesting question. You are writing a case on HR, but there are also innovation related things, and you are thinking of whether clubbing it together or writing to separate case. That is also dependent on your objectives. Would you like to have a very focused case on the HR practices, or would you like to have some case with those innovation aspects as well? Sometimes it may make sense also. If the HR practices goes towards making those innovations, to enabling those innovations, probably you can use that. But it all depends upon your objectives. And if you think that you can write a standalone innovation case, then also it is fine. So if you want to increase the versatility of uses of the case, and if you can really tightly write the case with both the components, there's nothing like it. So you can go ahead and do that. But be sure about what you are trying to achieve with that case, because that will determine what you do, how you go ahead. Okay. Another question that has come up is, could you please suggest some topics on cross-cultural communication? What are the secondary sources for the same? Now, regarding cross-cultural communication, this is a very specific question. But at the same time, I don't know how much help I can, help you on this. If you really want to write a case on this, I would suggest that you get in touch with some companies which are having this kind of issues. They face these issues. They keep facing these issues, because that will help you make a very good case. From secondary sources, you may not always get very good triggers or the kind of informations that you will get for that. But yes, there has been cases. It's not that it cannot be done, because I remember writing some cases on like where there are differences in Japanese culture and the Chinese culture. So that kind of cases we have done. But it is a tough ask to do it from secondary sources alone. So I would suggest that you look for some companies where you have access and talk with them and try to come up with some solutions. Sorry, I could not be of much help here, because I don't have anything in hand to tell you at this point of time. Another question is, How good is a hypothetical case? As they can also be used to explain real business situations. Can the candidate submit hypothetical cases for the conference? Now, when we are talking of hypothetical cases, I intentionally left it out from the different types of cases because these are the type of cases where which do not resonate much with reviewers of journals. In most cases, they look down upon these hypothetical cases. So for this conference also, we have decided not to have hypothetical cases. But yes, they have value. I would not say that they don't have value. We are quite open. Me personally am quite open as long as there is a utility for the case. They can be very useful as long as it is written by a really experienced person. So I have nothing against hypothetical cases, but for the sake of this conference, and you will also find out if you want to publish it in some journals, that you will find it very tough to get a hypothetical case published. Another question is, I have identified a gap, means an area where a case is not there. I have also defined the objectives to write the case, but I am unable to find a situation or event which could match to my objectives. Now what do I do in such a situation? So you have your objectives, you have identified a gap, but you are not finding a suitable case trigger. There is no other option but to search further. Because if you don't have the trigger, you don't have a case. But these objectives are useful. I would take it at face value when you are saying that there is a gap, there is a requirement. So keep searching further, and I'm sure you will get something, because you can even find both if you really wish to. So a case trigger won't be a big problem. So another question has come in. We are often faced with limitations in terms of access to company. In that situation, what can be the alternatives for someone to start with? Okay. Yes, access to companies may be very tough. You can always keep exploring, but at the same time, if you want to get started with writing a case, you can also use some secondary sources, write your first case, get comfortable, and then as you are exploring with the other companies, you will at some point of time get some success, and then you can write a field research case as well. So in the meantime, you can also try out other options, like you can also write from some personal experiences, and you can also use secondary sources to write cases. As long as it is well researched and it is useful for the class, there are no problems at all, because utility is what matters. Another question that has come up is how to frame objectives of the case study. Is there any guidelines or golden rule? Yes, this is an extremely important topic, and it's I thank you for this question. How do you go about framing framing the objectives? Now this will be determined by your educational objectives. What are you trying to achieve in the class? So if you are, like I gave you one example already, that I wanted a case on OnePlus, and that too in India, and I wanted to teach international marketing. I am going from broad to more specifics. Now in international marketing, what do I want to do? I want to have an analysis of the country. At the same time, what are the initiatives that they are doing to expand the market? So how they went about expanding, what is their expansion strategy, what is the mode that they are going to take. So and we also wanted to explore some solutions to the challenges that were posed by this particular country. Now this forms the objectives for the case. So after going to the case, I wanted the students to be reasonably aware about the international marketing aspects, particularly dealing with country selection and evaluating the opportunity for the country and what are the characteristics of a particular country market, how it is different from their home market, and how the host market is different from the home market, and things like that. So based on your case, that is how you you go about framing the objectives for the case. Now I have another question: is can a topic without any dilemma be selected for the case study? How can students' engagement be anticipated in such a general case? Now, can you have a case without a dilemma? That is the first part of the question. Now, what I see here is there has to be some inherent dilemma in the case. Some inherent dilemma, it may be implicit, it may not be explicit, but there has to be some issues that a case focuses on. So if you don't have any issues to focus on, probably there is no value for this case. So I think your question is whether there should be explicit ones or not. So there can be some very good cases also. Maybe there are even more complex cases where the dilemma is not written out explicitly, but it is implicit in the case. So if you can write cases like this, it's wonderful. You can always go ahead and it will be engaging to the students as well. And also the teacher's role is there to engage the students. So he or she can also make that happen in the class, as long as they understand that these are the implicit things. Dilemma and how this can be also identified by the student, and it will form part of the exercise. So another question is, I have identified broad areas for a case. However, there are too many theoretical aspects in my mind that can be related to the case. How do I select one best such aspect? Interesting question. You see the trigger and you see there are so many things that can be accomplished with the case. But one important thing here is that a case as such is also specific. So if you are approaching and trying the case to be for everybody and for everything, probably that's not the right way to go. So you have to drill down to some specific objectives which you are going to achieve to the case. So if you think that it can be looked at from multiple ways, you can write separate cases also in some cases. But if you think that it can all be covered in a single case and it can increase the versatility of uses of the case, then go ahead and do it. You have to write a very good teaching note for that. You can in the teaching note you can probably look at the different ways in which the case can be taught, and we can have more discussion on this in our last webinar, which is in June. Can case be a story also? Now that is a very nice question. Yes, a case should be a story. It should be a story. It should be a very interesting story, but at the same time it has to be more than a story, in the sense that it's not something for enjoyment or refreshment purposes. It should have some educational objectives to achieve, and that is what makes it a case. So as long as you are able to take care of those educational objectives with this case, then you have achieved your objectives of writing a good teaching case. Next question is, can a case be around an individual experience in an organization, especially in the case of OB HR areas? Yes, a case can be based on an individual's experience in a company. So if you are documenting it from someone, it is good, it will be prudent that you do it in a very nice way, but at the same time you also try to bring in some multiple perspectives. As I had told earlier, multiple perspectives are very important, because otherwise the narrative may be very one-sided. You know, you are looking at, say, some person is there and you are dealing with an OB subject or HR aspect, where the person has a perspective on that, and if it is all on that perspective, probably it may be biased also in some ways. So there should be some ways of cross-checking it with some other stakeholders as well, so that will weave in the required number of perspectives and make the case more interesting. But yes, you can do it. You can do it with one person's experience as well, as long as it is well documented and you have permission to put this up as a case, and even the permission of the company. Okay, we are having a lot of great questions coming in. So the next question is, if the case has different perspectives, what to do in that case? We cover all the perspectives or focus on one perspective? Now, as I have said, focusing on one perspective is not a great idea. You should always look at other perspectives as well. But should you be looking at all the different types of perspectives? Probably not. You should look at your teaching objectives and see what you are trying to achieve with your case. And if you are able to do it with the most relevant perspectives for that particular case, and you are able to identify them, collect them and put it in your case in an interesting way, nothing like that, you have a very good case. Any other questions? Yeah, I see some more people typing. So we can also answer, because this is one of the first webinars, we will also answer some queries related to the conference if you have, but at a later stage. We are getting a lot of queries about the conference. That is why I wanted to put it up, because here we would like to focus our the question and answer sessions more on the topic of the webinar. I think we have exhausted all the questions that have come our way. So thank you very much. This has been very interesting, and I would like to thank you for attending this webinar, and I am also thankful for the opportunity of addressing you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next webinars. The very next webinar is on April 21st, and it will be on research for writing a publishable teaching case. I'm sure a lot of you will be enthused about attending this, because it deals with your publications as well. So I look forward to seeing you there. And yes, I am also very interested in seeing your cases as well, your submissions for the conference. So thank you very much. Have a great day and have a nice weekend.